The sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer podcast. What's up, everybody? I'm Matt Martelli. This is the Off-Road Racer podcast, and I'm here with my actual brother from my actual mother, Josh Martelli. What's up?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me on the show today, Matt.
Of course. No, it's been a long time coming. We had the one with you and Killon, but we have a lot to talk about. I think first, just jumping into it, I'm super proud of you that you got appointed to the rack. For all the people out there, explain what that means and why we're doing it.
Yeah, obviously very thrilled and humbled to be selected as one of 14 members of the California Desert District Advisory Council. I'll give a brief overview of what exactly that is, and then we'll talk about the importance of it. But essentially, a couple weeks ago, I was lucky enough to be selected as one of these new members of this California Desert District Advisory Council. So what this is a group of volunteers who advise the BLM for this particular council. It's the state of California, and it's a 3-year appointment, and we get to meet with the BLM a couple times a year and discuss a whole variety of issues that affect a lot of different types of stakeholders as it pertains to federal land, right? Federal land within the state.
Which is what we race on.
It's absolutely what we race on. So the Department of the Interior established these resource advisory committees or councils back in 1995. And essentially the members vote on recommendations related to public land management, right? So they provide these recommendations to a designated federal official, who in our case is the head of the state BLM office. And then the BLM take those recommendations, and it actually can shape the laws that affect those lands, proposals that have come forward. It's actually a very important and critical part of the public feedback process, right?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I really want to emphasize with everybody, right? Is that, when we came into the promoter side, we are under the guidance of Casey Folks, right? And Casey had this style where he would just like walk in the room and just lambast the BLM. Like, it was one of the most uncomfortable meetings or types of meetings that I've ever had, right? It's like your grandfather screaming at you. And I remember sitting there going like, dude, like, this is not going to go well. And that was his style. Like, he was, bombastic about, the idea that these are our lands and this is our goddamn right. And I agreed with, the philosophy. I just didn't agree with the approach. And one thing that we've done a better job of in particular in you is, creating these relationships with the BLM that are much more symbiotic, definitely a lot calmer. And, we're working together. I mean, these guys they don't wake up every day and go, hey, let's deny usage for off-road. They have a wide variety of responsibilities in managing these lands. And there's a lot of people who want to use these lands for different purposes: mining, horseback riding, hiking, solar panels, etc. And we want to have a good relationship with them so that, we can not just race, but have places to go and recreate.
Yeah. I mean, So funny story. My introduction to the BLM was Casey inviting me to the Henderson Public Library. Didn't really tell me why we were meeting there. And when we got there, it was a open public commentary on some proposed changes to, I believe, the way that outdoor recreation was going to be managed in the Ivanpah Valley, which is exactly where we raced the mint, right? Pretty important meeting. And to your point, he got up in front of this room of like, a couple hundred people and some pretty high level Southern Nevada BLM folks, and proceeded to read him the riot act. Now, the good thing about it was he had done a bunch of research and had documents, generated from the BLM, and was able to point out, hey, these new proposed guidelines don't even follow what is in, your resource management plan for the area. And so the takeaway was, yes, it's important to show up to these public forums. Yes, public commentary is absolutely critical. And also there's a way to do it where you can get some things across, and there's a way to alienate these folks right off the bat. Sometimes grease goes a little further than a hammer, right? So we will always be extremely grateful to Casey for including us in that process. And mind you, this is back in like 2014, I think, right after we bought the mint, right around the time we ran the mint with him with Best in the Desert for the first year. So to his credit, he didn't have to invite us to those meetings. But, being the guy he was like, no, I want you guys to see this. I want you to be included in the process. So for the past 10 years, we've worked very, very hard to establish a rapport with that office, and any BLM office that we work with. Come through the front door, collared shirt, shake their hand, present them with professional documents, address their concerns, and make the relationship non-confrontational. And I can tell you that has paid off dramatically. Like, just one example. We've had a couple government shutdowns over the last few years. When the government shuts down, the BLM has the option of either allowing you to operate with your special recreation permit that you've submitted, or they can take a step back and go, sorry, guys, government's shut down. We don't have to show up to work.
Right.
And I think because of the way that we've handled ourselves, particularly with that Southern Nevada office, we got a call a couple weeks before the mint, and essentially they said to us, hey, the government is going to shut down, but don't worry, you guys are still going to be able to have your race.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that kind of cooperation and support from that office is derivative of our attitude when we walk in there, right?
Absolutely.
So in kind of looking for other ways for us to further that relationship, I did a bunch of research, and when I realized that these advisory committee panels existed, I got lucky. We got lucky because the renewal for California was coming up essentially a couple months ago. So it's a very easy process to apply for it. There's a few pre-qualifications like residency. You have to be a resident in the state in which you're applying for. And then there's categories that you can apply for. So within the Desert District Advisory Council, there are people involved in mining, ranching. There's outdoor recreation, which is what we're obviously interested in, but there's tribal leaders, Native American representation, and then even just state and local government, right? People who operate within Southern California, in our case, who are involved in state management of lands, also want to have input in what's going on with the federal level. So the council has this very unique opportunity to provide very important specific feedback that affect our industries. And that's in addition to public commentary. Like, the public still gets to comment on a lot of these things that are proposed at the state and the federal level, but this is more nuanced. And a lot of them are in-person meetings.
Sure.
Where you're actually meeting physically out in the real world, and you're looking at these trails going, hey, we have a proposal to shut this trail down because it's not being used very much. Well, if I'm there representing OHV or our industry of off-road racing, I'm going to look at that and go, well, maybe people just don't know the trail exists.
Yeah.
You know, before we go shutting things down, let's analyze what the reasons are. If it's gross, misuse or some kind of like environmental, disaster, okay, we can have that conversation. But there's a common theme with the BLM that I've noticed in the past 15 years of doing this. And one is, if you don't use it, a lot of times you lose it. But non-use is not always perfectly correlated with we don't care about this, right? A lot of times it's like we don't even know that trail exists, right?
Right.
So let's talk about for a second our goals of why we joined this Desert Advisory Committee, because there's some really key things here that I want to hone in on and share with our listeners, right? One of the biggest and most important is advocating for responsible off-road recreation that has a minimal environmental impact and preserves access to OHV trails. So what do I mean by that? Well, let me start with an example in Arizona, and I think you guys will understand it pretty quickly, right? There's a lot of angst and anger within the Arizona ranching and cattle grazing community right now as it pertains to open OHV access. Arizona is a rad state from the standpoint you can pretty much just pull your truck and trailer over on the side of the road and go ride.
I mean, you can drive your UTV down the street with your gun, and you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
It's awesome.
yeah.
It's awesome. But therein lies the challenge, right? The UTV market has exploded. It's like owning, a boat or anything else at this point. And, there's people just driving to Arizona, unloading their UTVs and going buck wild. And the problem is they're not actually paying attention to where they're riding.
Yeah.
They have this perception that they can just drive anywhere they want to drive. And they're crossing cattle land and ranch land and opening gates and not closing them. They're leaving trash all over the place. They're destroying, some of the trails, and they're not around to clean them or pick up after them. So there is a statewide movement in Arizona right now to really curb that, to make it so that open OHV access goes away. So having somebody from our industry representing outdoor recreation right now in Arizona is like huge, like absolutely critical. Another thing that we're trying to do is promote collaboration between off-road enthusiasts and conservation groups, government agencies, private landowners, to develop sustainable land managed plans. What do we mean by that? Well, right now, one of the biggest threats to a lot of us as stakeholders, and that includes ranchers and agriculture, is this explosion in the solar industry, right? One of the things that's happened in the last couple of years is the barrier to entry, the cost for building solar projects has come down so much that a lot of these projects, they're looking at the math on paper and it's incredible. Invest $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, whatever it is now to build these solar arrays. And not only will they pay for themselves in approximately 3 years, but their life expectancy is between 10 to 20 years for that equipment to stay good. And now they're capable of generating so much power. The panels have gotten so good. It's free money. Like, it's crazy. It's a 500% return on investment.
Right.
Right. And where do they want to put those solar farms?
In the desert.
In the desert, but in Ivanpah Valley,
Yeah.
in places in California, New Mexico, Arizona, where they get awesome sun right next to transmission lines. And a lot of it is right on top of where we want to recreate.
Yeah.
So that's just a few examples of why we wanted to have a voice on this. This in California, they call it the DAC. It's the Desert Advisory Council. We want to have a voice there so that as these proposals come up, and there's a bunch of them right now. I mean, we had a Zoom meeting with 56 people a couple weeks ago, and it was shocking how many things are being debated right now that affect not just outdoor recreation and not just motorized outdoor recreation, but they definitely will affect us in the racing community in terms of the land that we have access to.
Well, I think that's another point to explain is like we have regular outdoor off-road recreation, and then what we do is special. It's high-speed events, right? So we have even less areas that we're allowed to use, right? So yeah, I mean, look, it's to me, it's very simple. It's like either you have a voice or you don't have a voice. And, by the time that they're taking, input from the community, it's not that their mind is already made up, but they're already down a path, right? So, it's to me, it's just a no brainer to have somebody like us or like you, on this council representing, the off-road culture.
Yeah.
Attention Off-Road Nation. The Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship comes roaring through Parker, Vegas, and Barstow in 2024. It's three of the most prestigious and competitive off-road races in the sport. It all starts with the return of the Parker 400 in beautiful Arizona, January 10th through the 14th. Then it's the biggest, baddest, most grueling off-road race on the planet. The BF Goodrich Tires Mint 400 comes roaring back into Sin City, Las Vegas, March 6th through the 10th. And finally, the climactic conclusion of the Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship, the California 300, returns to Barstow, October 2nd through the 6th. Visit unlimitedoffroadracing.com for complete details. The 2024 Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship is here.
I mean, one of our biggest challenges is within the outdoor recreation bubble, there are probably anywhere from 30 to 50 other industries as subsets of that, right? And it's funny because you would use the expression "strange bedfellows." You wouldn't expect that us as an off-road community would have anything in common with people who just want to hike or kayak or bike or ride horseback or any of that stuff, right? We don't typically coexist on the same trails. But I'll tell you why that's important. Let's talk about the financial part of this and the effect of the economics of it, right? So I did a little bit of research, and it turns out that the outdoor recreation industry in the United States, it's a $788 billion annual effect on the U.S. economy. Okay, where does that stack up? Well, at the top of the list is, of course, agriculture. It's about $1 trillion a year.
Right.
Right. In the mix, you have mining at 392 billion, utilities like the solar stuff and power generation just below mining at 330. And then you got things like the movie industry, 135 billion, right? We're number 2. Outdoor rec at 788 billion is the second most impactful effect on our economy as an industry. And that's incredible. So think about that for a second. The mining industry and the utility industry combined still have less effect on our national economy than outdoor recreation.
It's funny because I was talking to Fred from ORBA about these numbers, and what that equates to is roughly 2% of the entire GDP. Like, that's bonkers, right? And what's interesting about this data, and we admittedly need to do a better job of gathering and measuring. That's one of the things that's on our list to do. But that's only accounting for the things that are going on federal lands and state lands. That's not accounting for all the private land stuff, all the stuff that goes on in Mexico and, et cetera. So there's, those numbers are even bigger than what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up ORBA, because I was going to say one of the things that the mining and utility industry do that we don't do, or have that we don't have. Well, we do have it, but they do a better job of politics.
Yep.
They do a better job of going to Washington and meeting and pushing legislation, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the example that I try to use to explain it to everybody is like ORBA is our NRA. Mm-hmm. And, there's a lot of other organizations, Blue Ribbon Coalition, Tread Lightly, which I'm on the board of. They all are involved with lobbying as well, but ORBA is the tip of the spear. So if you're in an off-road business, you should be supporting ORBA because they are working diligently to make sure that our lands are open for us to use and have this beautiful industry.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. So let's talk about action items. Here's the good news. Almost every state in the United States has a RAC. They have a Resource Advisory Council. Nevada has two of them because it's such a massive state. Obviously, we have the one here in California. Arizona has an amazing RAC. And it's currently full. They just reseated it. So when you look at the members of that RAC, man, they're stoked. They've got JC Saunders on there, or Sanders. I'm not sure exactly how he pronounces it, but that guy's responsible for the Arizona Peace Trail.
Yeah.
Like he's like an OHV, UTV hero.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one thing I want to point out, Josh, is that like the people that champion this, like these are important people, like whether it's, Mark A. Smith, who basically is the reason that we still have the Rubicon Trail, or JC, who, helped, basically create the Arizona Peace Trail and get it open. The people are important. It's important that we have these people in positions like sitting on the rack because they will affect future laws.
Yeah, absolutely. It's people involved in the industry giving direct advice and counsel to the people at the BLM at the state level who will feed that up to the federal level. And I think that what I've come to understand just in the last few weeks and being involved in this first DAC meeting here in California is the influence is substantial. Like it's substantial. Like the Department of the Interior takes feedback from the state leaders very, very seriously. And in fact, leans on them to do a lot of the legwork. Right. And advise them on where a particular administration should land on a certain issue. And if the feedback from the Southwest United States is, hey, this new monument proposal or this new restructuring of special recreation permits or whatever it is, we don't like it. And they get that feedback from Utah, Arizona, and California, Nevada, then there's a really good chance that's going to affect change one way or another. So here's how you as a listener can get involved, right? Go to blm.gov/get-involved. blm.gov/get-involved. And look for a tab on the right-hand side of that webpage that says Resource Advisory Councils. It lists every RAC for every state, and they're all in various stages of operation, right? Some are a little dormant. Some haven't operated for a year or two. Some are extremely active, like the California and Arizona DAC and RAC are extremely active, right. And it's a lively bunch of people, right? Nevada seems a little sleepy, but I think the more of us that are on those panels, the better. And there's a specific category both for recreation and commercial recreation. And that's kind of where we fall as OHV off-road UTV advocates, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting too to talk about like what is the end goal, right? Like, not just to keep the current areas that we have open, but to actually open up more, right? Like one of the interesting things that's been happening with a lot of the state parks is that they've been running out of money. And they've been looking for ways to raise additional funds. And, most of them haven't figured that out. And having an off-road trail is one way that, they can generate money. We're happy to pay for access. We're happy to buy a green sticker. And when you look at the economic effect of, off-roaders coming to an area and the history of that, we've defined all these areas as off-road areas to use, recreate, et cetera. I mean, I was just in Moab for Easter Jeep Safari, and, they're struggling right now with the local community, not understanding how important that economic impact is to Moab. I mean, without it, I mean, Moab will go back, 30 or 40 years, in terms of, tourism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's another example of kind of what we're talking about. In the last DAC meeting a couple weeks ago, one of the things that came up was ghost camping in and around Glamis, right? The fact that they don't have an enforcement mechanism for deterring people from leaving their motorhomes and RVs for over 14 days, which is, I think, is the max you're supposed to stay on federal land without a permit. And it's turning into a huge issue because what's happening is people who live close to Glamis, who are accustomed to coming out.
Yeah, they drop their stuff off a week before to hold their position.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of the locals are showing up and they're looking at these license plates and these tags going, this guy's not even from California. This
Right.
guy's from New Mexico and his rig's been here for a month.
Right.
And my family, we get, if we're lucky, 2 weekends a year to come bring our toys out here and play. And we can't even, so that's what I mean. Like the solution wasn't created in the meeting, but the problem was brought up and shared with us from the BLM, and they're asking us to come up with a solution
Right.
to police our own people, our own culture. If we're smart, we'll respond to that request and give them a way to fix that without it turning into a $250 a night camping fee. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And completely changing how Glamis works.
Right.
And you can write all the letters you want, but if being in these meetings is a way to affect change. Here's another one. In 2007, Mojave County, the BLM created a new resource management plan. And in that resource management plan, they did something crazy. They defined the ability to have a high-speed off-road motorized event within Mojave County. They limited it to 2 races a year. Guess which 2? It's 2 permits for the Parker 400. They wrote in that plan, there will be no off-road racing in this entire county, but for those 2 races. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy that even passed. It's crazy that it's 2007, right? So maybe the locals didn't know about it. I mean, who knows how it was publicized, right?
I think, honestly, like, my read into that is that's just pure ignorance, right? Like, we fight the stereotypes of what off-roaders are all the time, right? Like, we don't want to see trash. We're not out there blazing through, virgin territory. We're on a trail, and generally we stick to that trail because the chance of getting a flat or damaging your vehicle is high if you're going off that trail. So I think, a lot of stuff that I've seen in the past is based on ignorance. And then the other thing that they don't understand is the money that we bring to an area. The economic impact of off-road culture is immense.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have a particular vested interest in what's happening with off-road racing in northern Arizona. I don't think it's any secret that one of the reasons we moved the UTV World Championship from Laughlin to Havasu was because we were hoping that if we demonstrated if we demonstrated we could operate a UTV race successfully for 2 years in a row with the Lake Havasu BLM office, that could potentially lead to us doing a larger car and truck race out there.
Yep.
Well, guess what we ran into? The 2007 Resource Management Plan, which says, no, you will not. Now, it would take essentially an act of Congress to change that. And so we're in a really funky position. Now, luckily, the Parker 400 permit came up. We had 2 years of a great track record with that office. And so we were given the opportunity to operate that race last year, back in January this year. God, it feels like last year. But even as an off-road promoter with a vested interest in the Parker 400 now, I still think it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There are miles and miles and miles of OHV trails. God, there's a poker run out there every weekend practically, right?
Yeah.
And they're perfect for racing.
Yeah.
And as long as the organizations who are going in and applying to race in those areas are willing to do the cleanup and make sure that the trails are repaired for the locals when we're done, there's no reason why we couldn't race there. So speaking of trails, another appointment that we have within our wheelhouse was your appointment to the Tread Lightly board. And Tread Lightly has been an amazing partner for the last couple of years, but talk a little bit about them and what they do and why you sought out that appointment to their board.
Well, they do a lot, right? And it's really interesting because under Matt Caldwell's tenure, and unfortunately he just had to make a change in his life and step off of the leadership role. But regardless, there's a fantastic crew there to carry on the work. They do all sorts of stuff. They, trail marking, trail cleanup, management of all sorts of areas. I mean, just a ton of really positive work to help keep these areas open. And, I wanted to be on the board because I wanted to show people that by example that we as off-roaders care about the environment. One of the reasons why I'm so passionate about off-road is that you and I grew up going to the woods, going to nature all the time. It's something that's a part of us, right? And when we moved to Southern California, that thing that we did of going out in the nature just became motorized because we moved to El Cajon, and that's how everybody did it.
Right.
And it went from, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to the deserts of Southern California. And it's just beautiful. And I don't want to see trash. I don't want to see broken down cars and all the bullshit that we constantly clean up from the desert. Like, it pisses me off, right?
Yeah.
But rather than being the guy who's angry and who's always correcting people and saying, no, off-roaders don't trash the desert, I wanted to show, hey, I'm willing to go do something and lead and show people who we are and what we should be doing. And that dovetails into not just our appointments on these boards, but what we've done with our desert cleanup. I mean, we're at a point now where how many tons of trash have we cleaned up from the desert?
Yeah, it's incredible. Let me pull this out because the statistics are crazy, right? So we've produced a desert cleanup for the last 8 years at the Mint 400 in partnership, both with Trail Ready, but really it's the Republic Services partnership that's been very, very critical there.
Absolutely.
Because you've got to take this stuff somewhere, number one, properly dispose of it, number two, and they have been a fantastic partner. But in the past 8 years, we've pulled 229 tons, or about 458,000 pounds of illegally dumped trash. For the California 300, we did it 2 years in a row, a much smaller amount, but still significant, almost 25 tons. That's another 49,000 pounds. And then Parker, year one, 12 tons. 12 tons, and that's just out of the immediate gauntlet area, which is about 24,000 pounds. So our grand total organizationally is 532,000 pounds, 266 tons. Now, in mathematical terms, that's the equivalent of offsetting the entire carbon footprint of nearly 150 homes for an entire month. And that's just us. And there's a bunch of other people out there doing great work like that too, but it's incredible, right? And I want to give a very specific shout out and thank you to a guy named Jeremy Walters out there in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Jeremy called us, I think it was back in like 2017, I want to say.
Yeah.
And it was his idea to do a desert cleanup in conjunction with Republic, and it had nothing to do with the Mint.
Right.
We called it the Dash for Trash.
Yeah.
And he just wanted visibility so that it would be successful.
Yeah.
Right. He's the manager of their external communications. Very, very smart dude. And he's one of us. Like, he's a hardcore off-roader and loves going out into the Ivanpah Valley in the local Las Vegas hills to drive around and off-road. But like us, doesn't want to come around the corner and see piles of trash.
Yeah. No.
You know, and it's a huge deal out there. Like, we're making a dent in it, but there is a lot going on out there that needs more state and federal attention.
Off-road race fans, the third annual California 300 off-road race comes blasting back into Barstow this fall, Thursday, October 3rd through Sunday, October 6th. Don't miss your chance to see hundreds of the country's elite desert off-road racers go door to door on a brutal 300-mile desert race course and witness the exciting conclusion of the Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship season. Visit thecalifornia300.com for more information and to purchase spectating, camping, parking, and VIP tickets. The California 300 returns!
Yeah, and just like getting into that, like, I want people to understand that the idea of us doing desert cleanup related to the Mint wasn't solely for the Mint. It was, we want to influence local community, national community, and global community to, on this day, go out and clean up the desert, right? Like, we had a great experience growing up in action sports and seeing Surf Rider Foundation start with the beach cleanups here locally in San Diego, and now it's a global thing.
Yeah.
Now it's a one day a year that everybody stops and picks up all the garbage on the beach, and that, I think that gives you a physical appreciation for the damage that illegal dumping's doing. And you know, in the Las Vegas area, it's people going out and shooting stuff. It's like, hey, we're gun guys, right?
Right.
But go clean up your shit. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, don't leave all your trash out there. Pick your shells up. Like,
Yeah,
you know
it's
what I mean?
it's super disheartening because we've cleaned up these areas that we race through, and they are also areas where people stop and shoot. And people go out there and they dump stuff, and then the guys come out behind it and go, perfect. And now I have a water heater or a TV that I can blast into a million pieces. And I'm telling you, the one of the dangers of that, one of the biggest reasons we need to combat that, is because it's an excuse to take the land away.
100%.
You know, we're already in gray, murky area with the airport development and the high-speed train that apparently broke ground. Like, it's starting in California, it's ending in Vegas. Okay, that's great. The airport that's being proposed out in Ivanpah Valley right next to the 15 freeway is primarily for commercial. So it's going to make getting in and out of Vegas a little bit easier if you're just going to vacation. That's great. But if we lose the Ivanpah Valley for OHV and for racing, that's a huge deal. Like,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. And it's going to be very difficult to find another spot that close to Vegas to race, right? So to your point, the effect of this program is radical. Like, it affects our applications to race, which are called SRPs. It affects our ability to secure political support from politicians. It creates the opportunity for us to form alliances with, again, strange bedfellows, right? You know, there's over 150 events that go through that Southern Nevada BLM office that take place in and around the Ivanpah Valley. 150 events. It's not just the Mint and the Snore races and, you know, whatever Best in the Desert or Legacy are doing out there. It's also the Rise Festival. You know, it's also like there's a whole myriad of events that go on out there, and those organizers and those promoters should be our allies. Mm-hmm. We need to have a common voice, right? Because together we represent a massive amount of revenue to the state of Nevada.
Well, I think that's also like indicative of our approach of like, look, you know, at the end of the day, I think a lot of the land users want the same thing. You know, there may be, you know, some hikers who are like, hey, I don't want you to have the ability to OHV or to off-road and on these trails. Well, obviously we don't agree with that, but in terms of keeping the trail clean and managed and not having everything all beat to hell, like we're on the same page. Like we want the same things, and I think that the more that we can, to your point of being on these boards, is just be in the discussion and make people realize, like, the stereotype of us all lining up and driving straight through the desert and crushing cactus and all that kind of stuff. That's not what we're doing.
Right.
And in fact, you remember, like, there was a point where I'd asked you to come up with a measurement of how much of the Mojave Desert that we were using. And it was such a minute number, we couldn't even figure it out. It's like 0.000001%, because at the end of the day, we're using a 20-foot wide swath for 100 miles. It doesn't even show up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And we've earned and retained the right to do that because we've grossly over-returned.
Sure.
Right. If we're pulling 500,000 tons of illegally dumped trash out of the desert, then there's no question whatsoever that we should be allowed to operate races and to operate as OHV recreation groups in that desert. We've earned that right. Show me another group that's doing that. The mining industry isn't doing that.
No. Solar panels aren't doing it either.
In fact, what our spec 2 is the big giant hole in the ground that got left from the last leaseor. They didn't clean anything up.
No, they didn't clean anything.
Right? So let's cap this discussion off with a couple action items, right? Let's let people listening to this come away with a few things that they can do. A few key points. So the first thing is the desert advisory committees. So we talked about how crucial it is to have a seat at the table with the DACs and the RACs, right? They shape policies that affect us, our entire industry. So we've given you this pro tip of how to go to the BLM website and figure out if these RACs and DACs are in your state and whether there's somebody there representing OHV interests. And if there isn't, it's not difficult to fill out these applications and be considered, right? So that's the first thing we talked about. And don't forget, we talked about our economic power. We have one of the biggest effects on the economy of any industry in the United States when you talk about GDP, right? So we have to use that as a leverage point to have a seat at the table, and we have to remind politicians about this. And even the BLM, there's a very professional way to put on your applications, whether you're doing a group ride, a film shoot, or some other event on federal land. They ask you, why should we allow you to do this?
Right.
And your answer can include, because it will have a dramatic effect on the local economy.
Right.
And most of the BLM offices that we've dealt with take that to heart.
100%.
Barstow does.
Yeah.
Parker sure does, right? The effect on the local economy for the use of federally managed lands is significant. So don't forget that. And then talk about Tread Lightly. How do people get in touch or get involved with Tread Lightly?
It's super easy. Website, I think it's treadlightly.org. Otherwise, you can Google it. You can join as a member if you're, a business person that makes a penny off-road. You should be involved as a charter member. Same with ORBA. ORBA continues to fight for our rights to keep these lands open. So if you're a business, go join ORBA and, help keep the future bright for off-roading.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, we touched on the impact of our cleanups. That there isn't anything preventing any group of off-roaders from just getting together and deciding, whether it's state land, federal land, even private land, hey, we're going to do a cleanup.
Yeah.
Because this looks awful. At the beginning of our trailhead, there's a burnout RV. Let's figure out a way to get that out of here.
Yeah.
Right? That's how we preserve our access. So, we've got a desert cleanup coming up this October at the 3rd annual California 300. we'll focus once again on the Barstow area, because name another spot in Southern California that's more important than testing at Barstow.
Yeah, there isn't.
Right?
Yeah.
It's sacred ground. It's hallowed ground. And, a bunch of it's been bought up. There's a lot of commercial interest in the area.
And Barstow's growing.
Yeah. So, I can't stress this enough, but getting involved with local advisory counters, local advisory councils, looking for ways to participate, shaping the future of off-road recreation with our influence. It's just absolutely critical at this juncture. And if anyone out there listening needs more information on this, or you want to get involved with either our desert cleanups or anything that we have going on, or you just want to talk about, the DACs and the racks and how you can have a voice with the BLM, shoot me an email. Okay. josh@unlimitedoffroadracing.com. I'm happy to chat with you about it and to point you in the right direction, or to help you get involved with us, because this is how we protect and grow our industry and our sport.
Yeah. And two, like, it's important that we keep these lands open, not just for us, but for future generations. That's our responsibility.
It is. And there's a lot of external pressures right now. Like I said, I would say the number one thing that makes us nervous is solar. We're all about green energy. We're all about,
but put them on your roof.
Yeah, put them not in the middle of the little slivers that we have left all over the Southwest United States to actually do our races. Because at the end of the day, none of us want to have to drive 6 hours to start a race. It's just, that we shouldn't have to go to the middle of nowhere to do the thing that we want to do, because the lands that we used to do it on have been taken away just for money.
Yeah.
Right? That, let's be honest, we're never going to see a dime of.
But let's also define that too, because that's the interesting thing is, like, you were talking earlier about the amount of money that the solar industry generates. Well, yeah, we still generate 100 times more money than them.
More than that. Yeah, more than twice as much.
So when we start, this is a very important thing to understand with the economic impact that we wield, right? So, we are the engine for the economy, and when people get out and recreate and start spending money on hotels and RVs and food and alcohol and all the things that are, campsites and, all the things that money is spent on, UTVs, Jeeps, etc. That's the economy. And when you look at where the economy's at right now, it's going to be really important over the next few years for us to get back on track and to really stimulate the economy. And what one of the things that COVID highlighted is that as Americans, we are programmed to go out and drive and get out and go explore these beautiful open spaces that we have that are unique to this country. That is what being an American's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact of the matter is, if we're not at the table, our voice is not going to be heard.
100%.
So do what you can do locally, do what you can do at the state level. And again, if you're interested in affecting what's happening at the federal level nationally, check out these committees, because I can tell you already, just in the 3 weeks that I've been on this committee, I've learned more about what's going on and what's being proposed in the state of California than you could possibly glean from just, reading press releases or going to the BLM website.
Yeah.
It's very, very candid conversations, right? So, I hope everybody listening got something out of this one. And, we hope to see you guys out there at the California 300 Desert Cleanup.
Hell yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, brother.